Thank you, Andre, and also welcome from my side. So for tonight's Creative Talk, our topic, as you all know, is the transformation of retail and how it is changing from a mere point of sales to communications and storytelling platform. And as I mentioned to a couple of you when we were talking, we chose this topic because it kind of like perfectly represents what we're doing here at OSK. Over the past few years, we've observed some sort of like convergence between our areas of expertise. And as Andre mentioned, like retail design is taking up more and more elements of experiential events, and communication is taking place more and more in retail environments. And I think we all agree, and also the industry agrees, is that we've reached a point where there are no longer like clear lines between retail experiences and communications. It all has like merged into one like consumer and customer facing platform. So we all see this trend manifesting itself, and there's absolutely no doubt about it that this is happening. And what we want to discuss here tonight is how it is actually affecting the industry and how it affects society and how objectives and success has to be redefined with this trend in mind and where we all think this is going. So joining us here tonight are three speakers. First, on the far right, we have Nick Arauz, the CEO of Caswell-Massey. It is the first fragrance and personal care product company in America and was founded in 1752. And they recently opened up a beautiful pop-up shop on Bowery downtown. If you haven't seen it yet, go check it out. It's really cool. Then we have Tyler Balliet here, the founder and CEO of Rosé Mansion, one of New York's most successful and pioneering pop-up experiences. I'm sure you've heard about it or seen Instagram pictures about it. And last but not least, in the middle, we have our own creative director, Scott Faucheux. He has created award-winning experiences with well-known brands such as Coca-Cola, Kiehl's, The Art of Shaving, Samsung, and Urban Outfitters, among others. So how about we start with you guys introducing yourselves real quickly.
Sure. I get to start?
Yeah.
Tyler. So I've been basically an entrepreneur for like my entire career, if you want to call it that. And so like I've been throwing events mostly in the wine industry. So I started writing about wine in like about 10, 15 years ago. Didn't pay any money, but it flew me around the world. That was fun. But I started doing events for like 3,000 to 6,000 people. And I started this company called Wine Riot. And you could come, you could taste 250 wines from every region of the world. You could learn about it. We built a mobile app so you could remember everything you drank. And that was back when apps were cool. And we did about 50 of those and sold about 130,000 tickets over 8 years. It was fun, but it just kind of like, it's a slog. So sold that company in 2016. They're still running them, but and now I started Rosé Mansion last year with my same business partner as I've been working with for 13 years. And so the idea is that like you can come, you pay like 35 or 45 bucks, you get to run through all these different rooms, and in every room you learn about the history, the science, or the culture of wine. You get to try a bunch of wine, and then you end up in a bar and you get to drink more wine, right? You can like you can sit in the bathtub and throw rose petals, you can jump out of a cake and throw confetti. But then you also get to learn about how fermentation works and, you know, like how wine's 7,000 years old. The big distinction, I think, is that we're not an agency. Like, none of the wineries pay me. In fact, I buy all the wine, so we have no sponsors. So we're essentially an entertainment company. We make all of our money off ticket sales, and we always have. Like, so, yeah, I think that's a little not an agency.
All right, thank you, Tyler. Nick.
So thanks for having us here tonight. My name's Nick Arauz. My background is as an architect, so I'm actually a designer by training, and today I find myself as the CEO of one of the oldest brands in America. But my path here has been through a lot of luxury brands. I worked with David Yurman for a while and did experiences for them. I worked with Urban Outfitters also, which was one of the reasons I know Scott, in Anthropology, and developed retail experiences for a long time. And I had my own agency where I was developing work for helping to relaunch and reinvent other heritage brands like Fry Boots. So I'm wearing Fry Boots, I'm wearing David Yurman jewelry, I'm wearing some Caswell-Massey clothing. Caswell-Massey is a really fascinating company, and I've been there for 3 years now. And it is one of the oldest it's the oldest consumer brand in continuous operation in America. I think there's a bar and a paper company maybe that's a little older than we are, but one of the oldest companies in America. And we also have the fortune of making a fragrance, which is the third oldest continuously made fragrance in the world, number 6, which George Washington wore. So we always joke that he was our first influencer because he did help make the company quite famous. But we launched this store on the Bowery just a few months ago, and it's really, we call it the 10th generation, because it's really about introducing this brand now to its 10th generation of customers. And this generation is really different than the generation that was at our Lexington Avenue store between the 20s and the 1980s, or that our other New York store from the 1850s, or the store we had in Newport in the 1700s. So, it is, for brands, it's all about constant evolution and constantly looking forward into the future as much as you look into the past. And so, this is a great topic tonight, the so-called retail apocalypse, because, if you have a really long view of things and you see how things constantly evolve, it doesn't feels a little bit more like a bump in the road, I think.
All right. Thank you. Scott.
So I'm Scott Faucheux. I'm the creative director here at OSK. And for the last 20 years or so, my background is also in architecture and in brand consulting. And, part of what my role is to help brands ask questions that you guys have been asking, like what's the right way forward? What are people actually doing? How do we dig in and understand what people are actually going to respond to? And how do we develop relationships with consumers? And how do we tailor product and spatial service offerings so to be able to reach our communities and build communities around our brands? So I think that's...
All right, cool. Thank you, guys. So let's start the first section of our discussion tonight, which we want to talk about the anatomy of brands and their impact on society. So the first question I want to ask is, what makes your brand story compelling, and how do you think does your brand offering disrupt the market? So you want to start with that?
So how does it...
What makes your brand story compelling, and how does it disrupt the market?
I think, so there's a couple ways to look at this, right? Like, we opened Rosé Mansion last year. Last year we opened for 15 weeks, we had about 80,000 people come. This year we've got 120,000 people come. And so, or 130 now. And so we opened it, and I don't know, we kind of had this idea. Last year was just like I was pouring epoxy flooring until 5 in the morning the night before open, and then at 10 a.m. I was like, Good Morning America. It was a blur, the whole build out. So the second week we were open, I looked at my business partner, Morgan, and I was like, what is this thing? Like, what did we build? And because, what Friendster started as like a dating app, and so you never really know how consumers are going to use your product. And what we saw was this really interesting thing emerging, which was last year we were 95% women. This year we're doing a little bit, we got a couple more dudes in there, so 90%. And yeah, right.
I'm sorry, that's fascinating. That percentage is so
yeah,
high.
Yeah. We just stopped advertising to men because it's just a waste. A little bit better this year, but more dates. But we were looking at how people use it, and it's now that product discovery has really moved over to Instagram in particular, the idea of getting together and either going shopping or socializing. It used to be you go to the center square. It used to be you go to the market. It used to be you go to the mall. Yeah. We've got that doesn't happen anymore, right? Yeah. So what do you have? You're stuck with bars, I guess. So you can sit at the table and stare at your friends, and get rushed out, and you're supposed to order a drink every 30 minutes, otherwise the server gets mad at you. Yeah. So where do you go to socialize? And the other interesting thing that we have is you buy a ticket for a specific date and time. So you buy a ticket for Wednesday at 7:30, right? And so the average transaction is 1.9 tickets per transaction. The average person comes with 5 friends. And so you can pay your own way. So it's not this birthday party crap where you the check hits the table and you're like, well, I didn't eat the lobster, or you had 5 martinis. Everybody can pay their own way. You have to show up on time so nobody can flake, because you're going to run through the experience together. Yeah. And it really found that it's about celebrating and bringing people together. And that's what, I don't think we're necessarily disrupting the market, but we're seeing this change in society, you got rid of these social places, and so we can create a social place that people can go. It's affordable, it's also like celebratory,
like a new kind of activity that people can do together.
Yeah, and photos are part of it, but like every great bar night involves posting photos. Every fun time you get together with your friends, you're gonna take photos, and so that's just that's a part of it too. It's just like everything came together.
Yeah. Right. How about you, Nick?
I like what he was saying too, because I think that you talked a lot about basically people have a story to tell when they leave your experience. Mm-hmm. We always talk about Caswell-Massey as being a story brand and not a fashion brand. Like we sell fragrance, we sell bar soap, we sell things that are personal care items, but we're known for fragrances that we have. But we always talk about it not a fashion brand, it's a story brand, because there are stories that go with so many of the products that we sell, and people have associations of our products with people that they knew who wore it. Like we have dozens of people coming into our store all the time that are like, oh, this is the fragrance that my uncle wore, my grandfather wore, and that's why they might want it or be interested in smelling it again or want to own it again or make it their fragrance. And I think there's so much right now in retail that is about storytelling, either learning a story that you don't know before about the brand, or it's about creating a story when you're there. When we create new products, we always think of them as like story first. Like we just did a partnership with Yellowstone National Park, where we actually went there 3 times on expeditions and found rare plants and made fragrances from those plants. So there's a story that goes with the product that we have. And I think that's what, if you're going to make a retail store that's the equivalent of shopping on a website, you might as well just not bother. I mean, you have to make an experience that is either telling a story, creating a story, or becoming part of a bigger story.
And I mean, I went down to your store like over the weekend and saw that you actually, for each like product category, you have like a separate shelf and like some sort of like items to it that kind of tell some sort of story. Is that like that was all like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our store, first of all, it's like a 400 square foot store. It's tiny. And we have people who spend 45 minutes or an hour. I have no idea. Like they get lost in the store. And so it's actually about the size of this room. But there are all these little tiny stories that people can go into. But it is, if any of you go down there, you'll see it's sort of like a horseshoe shaped room inside of a bigger square room. And we kind of joke about it as being like a Venus flytrap, because we put the George Washington cologne at the very back in the middle. And people always come in and they read about the story of the brand and they want to smell that fragrance. They walk all the way into the back because that's where it is. That's where you have to go to smell that fragrance out of curiosity. And then as soon as they turn around, they're surrounded with, there's another, 50 stories there for them to learn. And they just keep going around in circles. So it's good.
That's
So, Tyler, you mentioned the word product discovery, and I think it's something that I noticed being in your shop as well, that the ability to kind of see the fragrances and discover the stories around it. It was compelling, and I'm a person who likes to shop, and I spend time to really kind of look behind things. But I spend a lot of time just kind of looking like, oh, there's really all these really well considered and well thought out artifacts, and those artifacts relate to stories, and there's an environment that's built that really could keep me there for a very long time. And I think that's one thing that I guess is for me driving new successful retail is the ability to keep us in one place where we're not just like, oh, I've seen it done it, boom, boom, boom. It's not a flat version. It's actually very three-dimensional. It's very multi-sensory. It's very engaging.
Yeah. And I think the omni retail, which people talk about, is kind of thrown around, but there are plenty of people who go to our store, I think, learn a story and then maybe shop it online or shop it from their phone. Retail isn't all about the kind of transactional, sale in place. We do sell goods you can cash and carry from our store, but there's plenty of other brands too that are out there now they're not cash and carry, shipped to your home. And if you walk out of our store, we can have a product that you like at your house tomorrow, so you don't really have to carry it out of the store. So I think that's also so many aspects of speedy delivery and everything else. They free you up as a retailer, as a designer of retail space, that you don't have to be burdened with all of those conventions of traditional retail.
So speaking of designer of retail brands and retail spaces, both of you, I think we all agree here that the story is a very important part of the whole experience of the space. how did you come to develop your story for your space? Like, what did the process look like?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about what we do is like, if you come to Rosé Mansion and you never buy the wines afterwards, I don't care, right? Like, don't care, really don't. So being a small business, the entrepreneur, like we launched last year with like credit cards, like no money. Like we took a $75,000 loan and like turned it into what it was. So we couldn't use any brand names. We couldn't use anything that was trademarkable. So we needed something that was not trademarked and with a really, really, really good story. Wine is a really good story. The wineries are just terrible at telling it, right? And so I have been telling stories about wine for like my entire adult life, and I think it's fascinating. Like nobody wants to hear like, oh, notes of blueberries and whatever. Like nobody cares. But like, what they want to hear is like wines are made for 7,000 years, but it wasn't until like Louis Pasteur discovered fermentation that anybody knew why or how it worked. We tell a story of port where like port wine was invented because like the French in the 1600s, the 9 Years' War, the French were kicking everybody's asses, and like the UK was basically like stop buying wine from them. But they had to get their wine from somewhere. But in Portugal, they would fill up the ships and it would get too hot and it would get cooked. So they had to figure out a way to get it back. And if you fortify it with alcohol and sugar, then you can make the journey back home. Great. That's an entire industry that got invented. So those kinds of stories I think are fascinating. Or like, women are genetically predisposed to be more sensitive than men to bitter flavors. So there's about 50% of women can't drink dry wine. That's an interesting story. And so we had to kind of like tack on to, and that's like something we're trying to do more and more of, which is like, what's not trademarked? What can we make? And it's less about us. Nobody cares about us. Like they care about, but we get to tell all these cool stories. And if you want to just come and take some photos and drink some wine, not paying attention, you'll have a great time. But if you want to stay and read some stuff and talk to our staff and like learn about all this stuff, you can too. So it's kind of like choose how much
you want to interact, how much you want to engage.
Yeah, and how much do you? Yeah, because at the end of the day, like as soon as it's about the ticket, like that's my business.
Yeah.
So like if you don't buy the stuff afterwards, like who cares?
Yeah.
It sounds like you guys need a secret science department. Like there's it sounds like all the stories that you just told are around science and around the science of wine.
Science and history.
And history, yeah.
It's like globe theater. It's like Shakespeare wine for the people.
Right?
Sort of. Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. How about you, Nick? Because you said like your shop is still, like, or your store is still like Shop and Carry. You can still buy product there. Like, is your ultimate goal like? I mean, of course, sales must play a role, but like, do you also just want to tell your story and like, are you okay with people just learning about it?
Yeah, of course we want them to buy our products, buy your products. I think we had a store. The store we were really known for a long time was our store on Lexington Avenue at 48th Street, and that was it was built when the building was built in the 1920s. The Intercontinental Barclay Hotel. It's a beautiful building. When that building was built, our store was built into that building, and since we closed that store in 2010 when they renovated the building, people have asked us to put it back, like put that same old store back. And we knew we couldn't reproduce that. And even if we did it perfectly, it wouldn't be the same for anybody. And that a new customer wouldn't really necessarily want that. It wasn't relevant to the customer we're talking to today. So I think, so much about what we did in the shop was to use like we used cherry, like we used wood. We used cherry because of the George Washington story. We chopped down the tree. We used quilts. We used all these different elements that were from American craft to tie the brand more closely to American craft and American history in many ways. But, really for us, we want people to go there, get a kind of deeper understanding of the brand, sample the product, learn the stories, take those stories home with them and tell other people those stories. And it's really for us so much about building awareness of the brand and doing that through really true, relevant stories that connect back to the products.
To make the product a little bit more than just a hand lotion, to actually have something to talk about when you use it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. You have anything?
chat. Let's go before moving on to the next section.
No, but I think the idea that that a product is more than just a product, that there's that it becomes an artifact, right? Whether it's a personal artifact or a cultural artifact, I think there's a growing recognition of that in a lot of consumer behaviors. That people are not just, there are transactional products of stuff that I need, but there's stuff that I'd much rather engage with if there's a great story around it, and if it helps my personal brand or my, me as an individual in a social context be able to tell interesting stories about that product.
Yeah.
There's a greater choice or greater preference if there's interesting stories around that product other than just like, great, I just need it. Cool.